International Women's Day is supposed to be a celebration of women's rights and our equal treatment. But are these rights now being trampled underfoot by an aggressive transgender agenda? This is Megan Bopp with Gript Media. The transgender rights movement was supposedly about protecting vulnerable people, but increasingly this seems to come at the expense of the rights of biological women. In honour of International Women's Week, Leicester University Students' Union decided to replace the E in the word women with an X to be more inclusive to female identifying persons. This decision came after the union elected a biological male who identifies as a woman to the post of women's officer. Complaints from female students were ignored in the interest of inclusivity. Even more seriously, Vancouver City's Council has voted down funding for the country's oldest women's rape shelter as a result of protests by trans activists. The rape shelter has long been a safe space for women, and because many of these women are fearful for their safety, it has been a male-free space. Trans activists protested the shelter because they claimed it was transphobic to exclude people who were biologically male. The Rape Relief and Women's Shelter was vandalised, with some pretty nasty graffiti scrawled on the building, and then a dead rat was nailed to the door, which seems like a radical and upsetting thing to do to a shelter for victims of abuse and violence. The shelter has helped tens and thousands of women and children since its opening almost 4 decades ago, and their website states that their services are available to all women who have experienced male violence. The page goes on to further state that while they understand that trans people suffer discrimination and violence, some of their core services are not available to those who were not born women. Though the shelter had a crisis line which they agreed would help trans women, for Vancouver City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young, this was not enough. Kirby-Young stated that the shelter needed to extend their services to transgender individuals as well, and that public funds should only be given to inclusive organisations. Councillor Christine Boyle supported Kirby-Young, stating trans women and sex workers deserve care and protection. As a result, the shelter, which supporters say was always stuffed to the brim, was ultimately defunded as of last week. The women and children in crisis that the shelter serves are now disadvantaged as a direct result of the protests from transgender activists. But this example of biological women being disadvantaged because of trans lobbying wasn't an isolated incident. Last year, British rapper Zuby sarcastically claimed that he had transitioned to being female and beaten the global women's deadlifting record using his natural physical strength. It was a joke, but a lot of truth is said in jest. Transgender women in sport have been endangering the physical well-being and achievements of biological women for years. In 2014, to name one example, Fallon Fox, a biologically male MMA fighter, reportedly broke the skull of opponent Tamika Brents after the first round while competing as a trans woman. Brents suffered a concussion, an orbital bone fracture and 7 staples to the head. Similarly, male-born cricket player Maxime Blythen was recognised as 2019 Kent Woman Player of the Year after outperforming biological females in the women's category. And yet, even now, the Olympic Committee is already considering letting at least 3 transgender athletes compete in the sports of the opposite sex this year. It seems that the safety and professional achievements of biological women is treated as secondary to the inclusivity of transgender individuals, even when these women have been victims of male violence. But what do you think? Are women being sacrificed on the altar of political correctness, or should a women's shelter or a women's sport team cater to anyone who identifies as a woman regardless of their biology? Be sure to share this video and let us know how you feel in the comments below. Thanks for watching.